right, let's keep smiling while we're doing our math. So now let's look at question number 9. What is the domain and range of the sine function? Well, let's all take a moment to think. What does the sine function look like? So we know that the sine function starts at 0, goes up to +1, goes down to -1. So if we do a sketch of the sine function, remember the sine function keeps repeating itself over and over again, and it has a period of 2 pi. So now that kind of gives us a sketch of the sine function. Now when we do the domain, we read the x-axis from left to right. It looks like every value is being used on the graph. So we're going to say that the domain is going to go from -infinity to +infinity. Now let's look at the range. All right, so if we read the y-axis from the bottom to the top, the minimum value we have for sine is -1, and the maximum value we have for sine is 1. So the domain of the sine function is -infinity to +infinity, and the range of the sine function is from -1 to 1. Now let's look at the second part of this problem. What is the domain and range of the inverse tangent function? Well, before we look at the inverse tangent function, let's talk about the tangent function. Well, we all know that the tangent function is an increasing function. We all know that the tangent function is undefined at every odd multiple of pi over 2. So we have an asymptote there. And we know that the tangent function is increasing between the asymptotes, and it looks like the cubic function that's increasing. Now the tangent function keeps repeating itself also, but it has a shorter period of just pi. All right, so now I could keep going on and adding the tangent function, but we're just going to stop there. So now that's what the tangent function looks like. So now if we wanted to do the tangent function, we could see that the domain is every value except where we have the odd multiples of pi over 2. Now what we actually want is we actually want the inverse function. So now to do the inverse function, we want to make sure that the section of the graph, we just take a section of it, we want to make sure it passes the horizontal line test. So if we just take a section of the graph, let's just take this section, that's the section that we take for the inverse tangent function. So if we do the domain of just that section of the tangent function, we know that the asymptotes are not defined. So the domain is going to go from -pi over 2 to +pi over 2. And then if we look at the range, every value is being used. So the range is going to go from -infinity to +infinity. Now we know that the inverse, when we do the inverse function of tangent, we know that the domain and range are switched. So if we do the inverse of the tangent function just for the section that I have circled, we switch the domain and range. The domain is going to be -infinity to +infinity, and the range is going to be -pi over 2 and +pi over 2. So when we're working with the inverse tangent function, when the ratio is negative, we use the fourth quadrant. When the ratio is positive, we use the first quadrant.